Hello and welcome to the SAF Insights podcast, where we uncover the market forces behind sustainable aviation fuel. I'm Asia Net Zero editor Amandeep Parmar, and this week I'm joined by Neste's Vice President for Renewable Aviation in Asia Pacific, Sami Jauhiainen. Sami, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Happy to join the podcast.
Cheers. So just to set the scene, Neste has been on the front line when it comes to sustainable aviation fuel, with around 100,000 tonnes a year of SAF capacity at Porvoo in Finland. And then by the end of 2023, should have 1.5 million tonne a year flowing once the expansion at your Rotterdam and Singapore refineries is complete. And then also in the US, you recently partnered with Marathon Petroleum on its 166,000 barrel a day refinery, and that was to develop their feedstock and sourcing production. So obviously Neste have a lot going on in this space, but you're not the only ones, and others seem to be catching up now. We see a slew of SAF capacity coming online with around 9 million tonnes a year forecast globally by 2028. Of which more than 3 million tonnes a year is in Asia Pacific from countries such as Danzig and Shell. But with all this capacity, the main issue seems to be, especially for heavy SAF, is the feedstock scarcity going forward. So do you see this being a big problem there? And if so, how are you looking to overcome that?
Very good question. So first of all, I think it's great to see this SAF capacity being ramped up by various players, and we will need that to support the aviation industry with its emission reduction targets. But if looking at the raw material question, what we believe in from the Neste side is that we have sufficient feedstock available to support this production increase that is anticipated. And what we estimate is that the type of waste and residue oils and fats raw materials that we use have the potential of up to 40 million tons globally by 2030. And in addition, there is much potential for HEFA technology in so-called novel vegetable oils. So that means vegetable oils grown on degraded land or as cover crops without land use change related risks. And for example, McKinsey and World Economic Forum have estimated that the theoretical potential for those is up to 150 million tons globally. So there is significant feedstock potential available, and the real problem is that we wouldn't have the feedstock, but it's more that, of course, we need to do much work to be able to access that full potential. So we will need to develop supply chains to be able to aggregate that feedstock. We will need to improve waste collection to bring it available. We need to improve pre-treatment capabilities to be able to use dirtier and lower quality raw materials. And what is also important is that regulators keep the eligible, acceptable feedstock base for SAF sufficiently wide. So that we have room to grow the SAF production and we have room to drive innovation in these markets.
Okay, interesting. And do you see kind of Asia being like one of the big sources of those kind of feedstocks as well?
Well, what we roughly estimate that of that 40 million tons waste and residue potential, around 12 to 15 million tons is in the Asia Pacific region. So Asia plays a big role in providing that potential, but it is quite spread across the globe.
Right. Okay. So, and I mean, you already mentioned some of the issues there could be in terms of needing pre-treatment and actually trying to get access to these feedstocks. Outside of that, I mean, what other challenges do you see for yourselves or other potential SAF producers in not only kind of getting the capacity going, but like attracting the investment needed and developing and building these kind of new technologies and refineries going forward?
Yes. So if looking at this question from a SAF producer and a SAF investor point of view, then the key issue fundamentally is about demand certainty, because we are talking about high capital expenditure investments So we need to believe that there is the long-term market there to back the business case for those investments. And in order to provide that, regulations, policies play a really fundamental role in unlocking and triggering the investments that we need in SAF production capability. And what we also believe in is that the proven tool to achieve that kind of demand certainty in biofuel markets is mandate, blending obligation type of policies that have already proven to be effective in the road transportation markets, including Renewable Energy Directive in Europe and for example, the low carbon fuel standard of California. And if we look at the aviation markets, what we are seeing that the frontrunner countries in Europe, Norway, Sweden, France have already implemented very similar policies on the aviation side that are in place on the road transportation side. And with the European Commission Refuel EU Aviation proposal and the actions that are driven forward by United Kingdom, we expect those policies to become European-wide by 2025. But of course, it's not enough to have those policies in Europe. This is a global market. So what we will need to see is such a policies spreading beyond Europe and including the Asia-Pacific region. And here the focus is really turning on the front-runner countries like Singapore, New Zealand, Japan, that we need to play a significant role in showing direction. Maybe there is one more thing to highlight, and that's really the role of sustainability standards, because what we need in such a global market like aviation is a degree of global alignment on what is sustainable and what is the criteria that biofuels and sustainable aviation fuel need. And it is much better to have those defined on a global level rather than each country or market defining their own rules. And from our point of view, the most logical places to create that alignment is to build it based on the CORSIA sustainability standards that have already been developed and provide a quite robust basis in defining the sustainability criteria.
Right. Okay. So just touching on that sustainability thing before we go on to the demand side. I mean, you use kind of heifer obviously, and it's been the most dominant pathway so far. But we're seeing kind of other technologies such as PTL. Is that something kind of Neste is looking at also, or any other technologies?
No, definitely so. So HEFA is one of the 7 ASTM approved production pathways approved for producing sustainable aviation fuels, and the only one of the 7 which is currently commercially mature for use. And that is what Neste's existing production of sustainable aviation fuels is based on. But definitely we will need to take into use other production pathways and to expand the raw material base beyond the oils and fats types of raw materials that we are using today. And we are very much focused on this also on the Neste side. And there are several feedstock bases that we are looking at and where we are evaluating investment opportunities at different stages of development. Our focus is on lignocellulosic raw materials, first of all. That includes various forestry and agricultural residues, sawdust, harvesting residues from forestry and the likes. Secondly, municipal solid waste, which provides significant global potential. And then the longer term topics, algae oils and power to liquids. So the production of hydrocarbons from captured carbon and renewable hydrogen.
Right. Okay. Thanks. And yeah, and you mentioned before, obviously Europe's been kind of ahead of the game when it comes to implementing the mandates. Asia has kind of been lagging behind a little bit. I mean, you've signed several offtake agreements with kind of regional partners such as Petronas in Malaysia and ANA in Japan. But as I said, it's been a bit lacking. There's been a few kind of such as New Zealand and Japan that have made some advancements, but kind of do you see kind of this kind of developing quite rapidly in the region? And like, if so, kind of what kind of form do you think the regulation push should take? Should it like favor the EU style mandate or do a more kind of US style incentive program?
Yeah, we are very much seeing that much is happening in the Asia Pacific region at the moment, and actually the front runner countries here are setting targets that are quite comparable to those that we are seeing in the European and North American market. So for example, in Japan, both the leading airlines as well as the government have set the target to have 10% of jet fuel in Japan to be sustainable aviation fuels by 2030. Just this week, Singapore and New Zealand announced sustainable aviation arrangement. So basically a collaboration to drive sustainability in aviation in many through many initiatives, including the establishment of green lanes between the countries. New Zealand has also announced a commitment to develop a sustainable aviation fuel mandate still this year, probably coming into force by 2025. And what Singapore is doing is currently, with the lead of Civil Aviation Authority, driving the definition of a blueprint to position Singapore as a leading sustainable aviation hub. And an international advisory panel where Neste is also part of has been set up to advise the development of the blueprint. So looking at all these developments, that gives confidence that Asia Pacific region is moving forward, and because it is a global market, it is highly interconnected, we will eventually need the broader region to follow these front-runner countries with a similar type of policies to create the broader regional market for SAF. Your second question was about the different policy instruments and what is most suitable for aviation, and there my view would be that we will need multiple different policies, but those policy tools play different roles. So mandates are fundamentally the proven tool to create the long-term market for sustainable aviation fuels, and ultimately they work as a vehicle of transferring the cost of sustainable aviation fuels ultimately to the ticket prices, and they follow the principle that basically the polluter pays the cost of the green premiums to reduce the emissions through the use of sustainable aviation fuels. And they are also very much a market-based mechanism in a sense that when a market for sustainable aviation fuels is created through a mandate, that mandate then forces the producers to compete to fulfill the mandate at the lowest possible cost way. So mandates play a very fundamental role. That is not to say that we wouldn't need incentives as well, but their role is different. They are not really scalable to be the long-term solution, but they can help accelerate sustainable aviation fuel use. They can, to some extent, make the transition smoother for the aviation industry, and they can also play a role, for example, in the form of research and development funding to support the commercialization of those technologies that are still not mature today. So they can be a complementary means.
Right. Okay. And just a last question from me then, like outside of those kind of all those policies, do you see kind of a role for carbon offsets in meeting these long-term net zero targets in aviation?
I think that is definitely the context where offsets are going to be used. So many parties have set net zero targets, and even though using all the means to reduce emissions, including sustainable aviation fuels, more efficient fuel efficient aircraft, operational improvements, there will certainly be some residual emissions that will require offsets. But what is really important is to see offsets really in that context. So the primary focus should really be put in reducing aviation's own emissions. And if we look at offsets and emission reduction tools as comparable options, that has the big risk that the funding and focus moves to offsets rather than those emission reduction solutions. And then the offsets are really rather than supporting, working against the true decarbonization of aviation.
Yeah, absolutely needs to look for harmonization in the policies there for sure. But yeah, thank you, Sami, for that. That's been a very interesting discussion. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to join.
Yes, thank you. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please check out our other episodes of SAF Insights. And for more information on Argus's global coverage of the sustainable aviation fuel market, please visit our website, argusmedia.com/SAF. Thank you.